Welcome to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. If you guys have been with us, we just concluded our series in Romans, and we are now going back to the beginning. Anytime there is something that has a beginning, the reason that I love it is because it helps to identify a lot of what's happening presently, right? When you learn about the wars in the ancient Near East happening right now between the Shiite and the Sunni and from Islam to Judaism to Christianity that's in that region to the Armenians, when you walk over there right now, it can be very confusing. Last time I went there, I was up on the Temple Mount, and we were getting yelled at as Christians. And there was Muslim protesters that didn't want us up on the Temple Mount, so they were screaming at us, and the people behind them had AK-47s, and it was terrifying. But when you go up there, when you walk in the middle of it, you're like, this is so confusing. What's going on here? As Americans, we just don't even like being not liked. We're like, why? I bet if they got to know me, they'd like me. But when you go back to understand the beginning of it, which actually the separation between Judaism and Islam is actually recorded in Scripture, that's the thousands of years that this conflict has been going on. When you go back to the beginning, the purpose of what's now makes more sense. That's why we want to go to Genesis. There's such a confusion. I mean, has there been a more divisive time in your life than these last 6 days? No. We're in the thick of it. We're in the middle of it. Sometimes I think in the middle of this, especially as Christians, we can get so wrapped up with who oversees our republic that we forget who oversees the universe. And that Donald Trump is so subject to his king, whether he knows him or not. So we're going to go back to the book of Genesis and talk about our original purpose. So Genesis 1, verse 1. As a great theologian once said, this is the most pregnant sentence in the English language, or in any language, actually. The most pregnant sentence, meaning it carries with it a lot of subtext. Every last word of this. When I was in college, I did a study. One of my classes I had to take was an Old Testament book of the Bible class. So it was Old Testament book of the Bible focused on Genesis. And we got through 16 chapters in 16 weeks. 16 verses in 16 weeks. So we started at Genesis 1, verse 1. In 3 weeks, we got to Genesis 1, verse 2. And after that, we slowly made our way through. So it took us 16 verses, took us 16 weeks. That's 3 hours a week. So that's 48 hours. That's 2 full days of study, and we got through 16 verses. We're not going to do that to you because you don't care about a lot of the stuff that we had to learn about, right? When it says in the beginning, what does the word in mean? Let's talk about, it's called exegesis. You have to go to all the different ways that the word in has ever been used in the Hebrew text and figure out what's the most appropriate way to understand it. That's with every word. And I'm talking about the beginning, we have to do the same with that too. We're not going to do that, okay? But we are going to look at the pregnancy of this text, okay? Verse 1. In the beginning, stop. Okay, here's how pregnant this text is. Where's my marker? Where's my black one? There it is. Gracias. So, thank you. In the beginning. This is a word in Hebrew. I'll use a lot of Hebrew today because sometimes these passages, it's not that you can't, without Chris, we wouldn't know any of this stuff. You don't need this to know it. This is just going to give you that next level. Sometimes when you get it in a text so much, you can forget that it still means something. Right? We just say it off the top of our head. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So you just start to go to sleep in the middle of the verse. Okay, this begins with this phrase, Berashit. Berashit. Okay, don't make that mistake. This is not talking about what a bear does in the woods, okay? I just made that up. That's next level. Berashit, okay? In the beginning. The beginning denotes something. Now, we're not talking about the beginning of a story like there was something before. This is the beginning of the story. In the beginning. Okay, this is talking about prior to anything existing. So when we say beginning, it's saying in the nothingness, before anything was. Okay, so it's not talking about the beginning of time. It's talking about before time. Before time was a thing. Okay? We only exist in a Newtonian understanding of the universe, built and managed and guarded by space-time and Newtonian laws of physics. And that is why we don't have an incomprehension of what it means to be outside of space and outside of time. As humans, if this is the beginning of our universe and this is the end of our universe, we're somewhere on this timeline, and we always use phrases like before, after, during, then, except, until, all those other things. Those are all time-sensitive words. We're talking about a God who doesn't deal with time-sensitive things. He's outside of it. He can manipulate it and turn it and look at it from this way and that way. He is in both places at once. He is simultaneously right now at the beginning of time and the end of time and right now. He is not bound by any certain present time. Okay? He's not here right now and was somewhere else last minute. He is always everywhere simultaneously, forever, both ways extended. This is who God is. It's his infinite attribute, okay, as Psalm 90 talks about. So in the beginning, that means before there was anything, we come with this understanding too, that's basically Hellenistic, is we have God versus evil, okay, or God versus Satan, as if they were rivals. And in the beginning kills this idea called dualism. Okay, dualism is that everything has its antithesis as well, right? Spider-Man has Venom, and Superman has Lex Luthor. Is that his name? Lex Luthor? Not Luger, right? Lex Luger? That's a gun. Lex Luthor, and right, and light has darkness, and Clinton has Trump, and everything has this. But oftentimes we even perceive that the evil side has powers beyond what the good side does, but the good side refrains from using those powers, but they end up winning, right? Harry Potter and Voldemort. Voldemort will cross boundaries, Harry Potter doesn't, and somehow he wins. We're willing to do stuff that others aren't willing to do, and that's why good prevails over evil, right? That's this whole idea. This is not the case. He has no rival. He has no equal. No one is the same as him. No one even has the ability to call themselves his counter. Because we're not even on the same plane. God is rivaled by anything like a lion is rivaled by a prune. There's just no fight there. You never have gone to somewhere and bet on a prune to take down a lion. They don't even have characteristics. There's not even any animos in them. There's no character. They're without thought or process or fight. They don't even have any of those things. This is what evil is compared to God. This is what Satan is compared to God. In the beginning, there wasn't even this. It wasn't there. There was only him. There was only God. He stands alone. God, this word in the Hebrew is Elohim, which is this weird understanding that he is one and yet many. Elohim is a plural word, and yet he's referred to in the singular tense. That's like if I called Sarah Sarah's. Oh, did you see Sarah's quote today? Oh, Sarah's. Yeah, did you see her? But you said more than one. Yeah. But there's only one. I know. It's both things at the same time. We'll see that in this verse. Elohim, in the beginning, Bereshit, in the beginning, Elohim, this God, the next word is, in the beginning, God created. This Hebrew word is bara. Okay, I'll try to do it without being too intense with my, let's just bara, and you can do a placeholder for the ah. Okay, bara, he barad. This is improper English, but we're going with it. He created, he barad. This God now creates. So we have one part of this Elohim, this tri-God, that seems to be a part that creates. He is the creator God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The next word in that sentence is the word now. So some of you guys are sitting in here, and when we talk about Christian thought, and some of the leading minds today in fields of science and technology and astrophysics and biology and neuropsychology are all Christians. They're Christians. Not all of them. I'm saying a lot of the leaders are. But the problem is that sometimes we, if we're atheist or agnostic, immediately hear one thing on a YouTube video and think that paints this global picture. In fact, if we did a better job about not broad-stroking everyone in the freaking universe, we might actually get along with one another. Right? If you support Hillary, you support corruption. If you support Donald Trump, you support this. It's like, come on. We've created what we call a false dichotomy with every person we've ever met. You're either this or you're that. You're either with me or you're against me. You're either, and that's just not the case. But one of the things that we think, though, is that if you're a Christian, you ascribe to what's called young earth. Okay? I, in particular, don't ascribe to that. I don't think the earth is only 6,000 years old. I think when you look at the cosmos, when you look at the expansion, I believe there was a Big Bang that took place about 14 billion years ago. I think that this universe has age in it. Now, whether God built age into it or it started and it existed for 14 billion years, one of the theories is called gap theory, which I would ascribe to. This doesn't mean that you have to. This means this is what I think, but it's giving credence to people who automatically think that Christians are brainless people who just want this fantastical religion so they can feel good about their grandma dying. That's not the case at all. Okay? I'm not stupid. These people who are leading these fields are not dumb people. You have to introspectively look at yourself and go, is it possible that half the world's population, including some of the most intelligent minds who have ever lived, believe this, and yet you, in your superior 17-year-old intellect, have found a reason to completely nullify and prove that it's false, and people just haven't figured it out yet? You have to ask yourself, if there was proof against it, would people still not believe it? And if your answer is, well, yeah, they have proven it, prove it. I would love to have another job. I really would, okay? I had a job before I was a pastor. I got paid a lot more money. I felt like it was a call on my life to come and talk to you guys and to preach and to teach this word of God. Why? Because I tried to prove it wrong, and I found the opposite to be true. I couldn't do it. So I arrived at the conclusion that I believe that it was actually true. But if you are the one, if you did it, if you proved it wrong and you found something, come let me know. I'd love to switch careers. And over 5 years of teaching to upwards of 100,000 different people, no one has ever come up and said anything to negate that with any kind of proof other than, well, I watched a YouTube video once, and it's like this naked 16-year-old kid on a couch like, hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Grayson. Here's what I found, right? And it's like, just watch the YouTube video, man. He's got proof. His proof is like his sister said so. He's like, Angela, isn't that right? Yeah, that's right. See? Proof, okay? So this is what I'm coming to you with. I'm not coming to you with, well, this one guy in this Christian article one time said this one thing. I'm going to talk to you from the field of what we call minimalist arguments. In other words, that's something that both sides can agree on. My conclusion is going to be different than what the sides agree on, obviously, but the proof and the facts behind it are not. These are ones that both sides agree on. They're the minimalist facts, okay? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, here's the gap theory. The question is, how long is the different distance between and the time period between verse 1 and verse 2? Right? If I'm telling the story, let's say I'm telling the story of Austin. Austin, what year were you born? But let's say in 1999, Austin was born, but I want to tell the story of how he went to homecoming this year. Did you go to homecoming this year? I want to tell the story of how Austin breathed one time. Did you ever breathe? Good. Let's say I want to tell the story about how his last swim meet. Water polo. Something with a Speedo. That's all I really know. Let's say I want to tell the story about how they won some championship that they may or may not have won. Okay? So he comes up to me, and I'm going to write his biography. So I start with, in the beginning of his life, in 1999, Austin Russell was born. Now, here's the story of this. This is what the Bible does. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, what's this story going to be about, though? The formation and structure of our planet and God filling the spaces he's created with teeming life. So one of the theories is the distance in time between verse 1 and verse 2 could be an infinite number of years, including but not limited to 14 billion years. Also, between chapters 2 and chapters 3, the end of chapter 2 is talking about the end of creation, the pinnacle of creation, which is man and woman are created, and he gives them responsibilities like make babies. And then at the end of chapter 2, it says, this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Who's to say 14 billion years occur, and then what's the next word in chapter 3? What's the first word of chapter 3? Now. And what's chapter 3 going to tell us the story of? The fall of mankind. How many of us automatically have perceived, if we've grown up in church, that Adam and Eve were created, and the first place they walked to was where? The tree. Right? They sinned in the first 4 minutes of their existence, and God's like, what the frick? One of the reasons that we can actually say is probably not the case is they had a routine they did with God. God's looking for them. They knew places to hide. They knew how to knit things together. They had these understandings of the world. So maybe there's a 14 billion year time gap between chapters 2 and chapters 3. What was that? Are they 14 billion years old? Yes, they would have to be then. But they weren't built to die. Humans were not built to deteriorate and to get older and to have the sun's rays and all that stuff be sucking the life out of us at every constant second. I'm not trying to be like fatalistic, but this is the world. They weren't made that way. They were made perfect, without blemish. Okay? When they're studying the DNA right now, what they say, the first thing that happened, the reason that we die, is there is a DNA participle that was ruined. That is what creates a deterioration of everything in your body. That didn't always have to have been that way, but they cannot fix it. Okay? This is the system that we live in. They weren't made to die. So maybe there's a 14 billion year time gap between the two of these things. We don't know. That's what gap theory says, though. So when the world has age and you go, well, Christians are dumb because they think the world's 6,000 years old. I'm a Christian. I don't believe that. I believe in a Big Bang, but I think the result and the purpose of the Big Bang was not what you might think it is in your science classes. Okay? God creates the heavens and the earth. He baras the heavens and the earth. Now, whatever time is between those two, we don't know. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. So here we have this Elohim, this God. We have one part of him that is creator. All of a sudden, we see another part of him, which seems to be this Spirit that hovers. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, God speaks. He speaks a word. And he calls forth what? Let there be light. He speaks this word of light. John 1:1, the story of Jesus in the New Testament, when John's writing, he begins with the exact same phrase that Genesis 1 starts with. John begins his gospel. Just turn there to John chapter 1, verse 1. Keep your finger in this place, and we're going to turn back to it. But go to John 1:1. It's towards the back of your Bible. If you need to use a table of contents, that's cool. Look on with a neighbor. If they have it and you want to check it out, just check it out on your smartphone. Doesn't make a difference. John 1:1. He's going to allude to this, and he wants to tell the story of the third part of the Trinity. The third part of the Trinity, actually the second part of the Trinity when it comes to the Apostles' Creed and stuff, is Jesus. But in the story of creation, it's the third party mentioned. We have a creator who barad, we have a spirit that hovers, and we have a word that is spoken. And it says this, John 1:1. In the beginning, how do you say that in Hebrew? Bereshit. Bereshit was in the beginning was the Word. And that Word was with God, and yet that Word also was God. This Word was with God, and that Word was God. He was both and. So we see one being, Elohim, that has three different manifestations of itself. We call them persons, one being, three persons of the Trinity. We worship one God. We are a monotheistic belief system. And yet we see that God has three persons, all of whom are divine, all of whom have divine authority, all of whom are subject to the other two. It's community perfected. Later on in this chapter, the Elohim will say, let us make man in our image. Let us make man in our image. And he makes them, male and female, he created them. He was with God in the beginning, John 1, verse 2. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shone in the darkness, and yet the darkness has not overcome it. So he's saying the word that came from the mouth of the bara, the creator, was Jesus. Now, don't think that God, Elohim, created Jesus. Jesus was there when? What is the first three words? In the beginning. He was there too. It's using this analogy now, saying that Jesus, from the very beginning, was the light giver. And then when he comes to earth, he is this light that comes down from heaven, and he penetrates the darkness, the sin and brokenness. And then it says the darkness didn't understand it, so what did we do with it? We killed it. Jesus, the light of the world from the beginning of time, came once again to our planet to be a light for us, and we hated him, so we murdered him on a cross. It says, and no matter how hard they tried to snuff out the light continued. So we tried to put him in a tomb, but that tomb was simply borrowed. We tried to keep him in the ground, but the ground could not hold him. We tried to keep him dead, but death spit him back out. It couldn't deal with his power. That is the God that we serve. He is three, and yet he is one. He is Elohim. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right now, Christianity is pitching an idea and a theory of how the earth was made. There are alternating theories. We now are able to look at them. There was a thought process that as science continued to take shape and learn more and study more, that there was a lot of popular scientists who are saying, we are just a couple decades away from there being no religion. We're finally going to get rid of this myth of religion. It's going to be great. People can think for themselves now. There's not going to be this overarching moral law that is impressed on people. And here's what happened. That was a call in the beginning of the 19th century, 18th or 20th century. By the middle of the 20th century, people were starting to change their tune. And right now, in 2004, 5? Question mark? Maybe 11. It is what it is. Stephen Hawking had a 70th birthday party. Stephen Hawking hired, you're a big fan of birthdays? Stephen Hawking had his 70th birthday party, and he hires these guys. He hires this panel of guys who are the leading astrophysicists in the world. The smartest guy, when I'm talking about astrophysicists, I'm talking about these guys who don't just deal with what you can see, but also with what you can't see. If you are aware or not, 99.99% of our perceivable universe is imperceivable. 99.99% of all matter and all energy in the cosmos is what we call dark matter. Dark matter is a fancy scientific way of saying we don't freaking understand what it is. That is it. So 99.99% of everything that exists in our cosmos, we don't get. We just don't get it. We even, for a while, we were like, black hole, here's what a black hole is, and it sucks out light. And then we found a black hole that's permeating light, and we went, what the frick is going on? We don't get it. Okay? The leading theory of how the world began with only using naturalistic explanation, you're not allowed to use a God, you have to come up with a natural theory of it. The leading one is this. We don't know. So he gives them this task. He says, you guys give me a state of the universe address. So he hires these guys. These are the most intelligent people on the face of the earth. And he says, at my birthday party, I want you to get up, show us your findings. What do we know about light? What do we know about other galaxies? What do we know about everything? Stephen Hawking, who's, brief history, this guy's just a genius in his own right. And they stand up and they go, this is their conclusion. After years of study, in the state of the universe, we have once again arrived at the very sticky discourse of how this universe came to be without the hand of a transcendent creator. Bye. That was their conclusion. We have arrived once again at the very sticky discourse of how this universe began without the hand of a transcendent creator. Why did they come to that conclusion? Because in 1915, a man by the name of Albert Einstein published a theory of relativity. This is going sideways. Can't do it. 1929, there's a man named Hubble who built something called a telescope, and he observed in the cosmos something called red light shift. And then in 2003, three guys got together. We'll call them BVG, Board, Blinken, and Guth. Funny names. Board, Blinken, and Guth. And each of which were working on different theories when it came to the expansion of the universe, and they came to this conclusion, that the universe is both expanding infinitely out and finitely backwards. Sounds like a mouse in here. That was terrible. So this is what Board, Blanket, and Guth came up with. They said, the universe, they're agreeing. They're going, there was a Big Bang. Now think of the implications of that. In the Big Bang, what was created? Everything was created. Prior to everything being created, when they talk about everything being created, it's talking about space. The space-time continuum existed only because of this Big Bang. So what existed prior to the Big Bang? The answer is nothing. Because if you have something before everything, then you're not talking about the true beginning. Because based on the second law of thermodynamics, what happens to every kind of energy and matter in a system? It does what? It breaks down over time. It moves from order to disorder or chaos. Good. So when you come with a Big Bang Theory, you're going, look, we've finally proven it's a Big Bang. It wasn't God. But here's the problem. When you have a Big Bang Theory and the cosmos is expanding, here's what BVG found out. They found that it seemed like the universe was at a point, and then all of it expanded outward like this. And not only was it expanding outward, the proof that they found out was that on the outskirts of the universe out here, speed was different than when you were right here. So here's what was happening. The universe was expanding, but it was actually accelerating outwards at 68 meters per second per kilometers per second per megaparsecond. Okay? It's a fancy word that basically means it's getting faster. So if you're on planet Earth, let's say you're right here, I'm making this up. I'm not making up the theory, I'm making up the numbers. And you go at a rate of 10,000 miles an hour, what they found out is if you take your 10,000 miles an hour and you go out to the outskirts of the universe, you're only going about 1,000 miles an hour. How could that be? The two ways to decrease your speed is to do what? The time it takes to get between 2 points. What are the two ways to decrease it? One is that your speed must increase, or that the distance between the two things that you're running in between must decrease. If you ever want a shot at beating Usain Bolt, the only way you're going to be able to do it is to get a what? Head start. What does a head start do? It decreases your distance. The only other way you beat him is if you get to ride in a car. That increases your speed. Here's what they found out. If speed were the same here, and yet you're technically going slower and you're covering less miles per hour, then what is greater out here? Distance. As you get to the far reaches of our universe, space gets bigger. We have one relative understanding of how big space is. It's this big. Imagine space being bigger. That should hurt everyone's brain because we don't have any understanding of that whatsoever. What they found was the reason that it's increasing is because, or not because, but if it's increasing and you push the reset button and you did a reverse all the way back to the center, you couldn't have negative speed. What's negative speed technically? Positive speed in the other direction, right? You guys taking physics? If not, just go to sleep right now. You're like, whatever, I don't care about any of this. I love Jesus, shut up. Okay, that's fine. You can do that 100%. Okay? It decreases until you get to a single point. So the proof that these three guys gave us was that the universe started from what we call a singularity principle, and before the singularity principle, there was nothing. These are what they proved for us, that everything came from one point. So you might be thinking, well, didn't we just nullify God? If we know that it came from a singularity, here's the next question. Before the singularity, what was there? Nothing. On your first day of your first math class that you ever went to, your teacher probably did this. All right, guys, here's what addition is. You take one thing, you add something else, and you get 2. I'm troubled at how long that took. This is day 1. When you walk into astrophysics class, the first thing you learn is this. Out of nothing, that should say nothing, nothing comes. This is what they write on the board when you walk into the class, and it says, my name is Dr. Herbmeyer, and out of nothing, nothing comes. Why? Because it's the fundamental understanding you must arrive at so you don't come up with these terrible theories about, well, maybe nothing did it. What is a black hole? Black hole is just nothing. No. A black hole can't be nothing because a black hole is something. Nothing does nothing but be nothing. So they kill that on the very first day. Go, listen, all that nothing can do is continue to be nothing. So maybe you're like, well, nothing, I've seen nothing before. No, you haven't. Well, one time we moved out of my house, and I put all my clothes on the car, and I got everything out, and so it was just my room. And there was nothing in there. You're lying. There was hundreds of millions of microparticles. There was billions upon trillions of atomic particles and subatomic particles. There were bugs living in throughout the fibers of your carpet and in the rugs. And you're talking about the walls. Walls are a thing with their everything that goes into the structure of whether it be drywall or asbestos or anything else like that. You also have in your room what we call space. Right now my arms are traveling through something. This is called space. Space is something. It's not nothing. It's hard because we don't know what nothing is. But imagine something that has absolute non-existence. That's what we call nothing. Guess what nothing is able to do? Nothing. So you have two options now. Because, based on Kalam's cosmological argument, which is right here, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. We just proved theorem B, or what we call axiom B, to be true. These guys did it for us, neither of which are Christian. These guys are not Christians. Although Einstein did say that the most incomprehensible thing about our universe is its ability to be comprehended somewhat. He was not willing to say there wasn't a God. He didn't understand how there couldn't be a God, but he didn't think that we'd found him yet. This is what Einstein said. These guys come up with the fact that we can prove this one to be true. The universe had a beginning. It began to exist. If something begins to exist, unless you want to use the ridiculous theory that things can create themselves, which is a logical fallacy. I made me. No, you didn't. You would have had to exist prior to making you, so it's just this infinite regression of childish arguments. I made me. Well, then who made that? Me did. I made me. The universe made itself? That doesn't make any sense. And so they go, well, maybe the universe is infinite. It always has been there. There's a problem. Have you ever heard of the second law of thermodynamics? Everything breaks down within a time. If the universe is infinitely into past time, there's two problems. One, there would be no present. Okay, let that blow your mind. If I had you start counting books in the library, I told you there's an infinite number of books, what number would you start at? 1. If I told you to count backwards from infinity back to 1 using library books, what number would you start at? Infinity is not a number. It's a placeholder for a thought. So if I said the universe is infinitely past, start. There's no beginning. If there's no beginning, based on our space-time continuum, guess what there also isn't? A present. Guess what else there isn't? There's no future. Because there's no beginning point. So if you say, well, the universe is infinitely past, there's a big problem with that. Number one, we don't live in a metastatic universe. Everything breaks down over time. 2, if it was infinitely past, there'd be no present. So then here's one of the leading theories right now. It's called a multiverse, which means, yeah, okay, so in our universe, it started from a singularity, but in another universe, what universe? I don't know, but imagine there's another universe. And that one, where'd that one come from? Well, there's this machine that just spits out universes. Bleh, 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 bleh. Well, where'd that machine come from? Shh, 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 don't ask big questions. There's a this is literally the leading theory. It's a multiverse. There's a whole bunch of universes. We just haven't, there's no proof for any of them or anything else like that. You're like, well, so you believe that without any proof. You guys have your own religion going on? No, it's not a religion, it's science. No, it's not. Science deals with that which is observable, measurable, and repeatable. Multiverse. Observable? No. Measurable? No. Repeatable? No. It's not science. A multiverse is not science at all. It's someone who is forced to answer a who question with a what answer. We talked about this at camp, but right here. Is this an Apple Watch, Heather? Yeah. What made your watch? Steve Jobs. No, I said what made your watch. You can't say the makers of Apple. What made your watch? All throughout, you might go, well, a machine made our watch. And then what I'm going to ask you? Who made the machine? Well, another machine made the machine. Okay, don't be a child. Think about the natural regression of what's going to happen. Eventually, you're going to have to come to a conclusion that somebody made it. Anyone here comfortable with the theory that sometime a machine, which was self-existent, all of a sudden became self-aware and wanted to produce Apple Watches? No. If I walked you into the woods and we found a house that was fully functioning, there was a turkey in the oven and smoke coming out of the roof, and the pivots and the doors and the fulcrums and the patio and everything was there, and I walked up and I said, what do you think happened here? And you were like, well, first of all, there was wind. And I'd be like, you're so stupid. Now, if you said, well, who made this? I might go, I'm not quite sure. Man or woman? I don't know. Tall or short? I don't know. Fat or skinny? I don't know. Old or young? I don't know. But here's what I know. It's someone. Because design denotes intelligence. Cause is something that only intelligent beings do. Things with no intelligence can do causeless things. Intelligence can't do causeless things. Cause always denotes intelligence. Intelligence always denotes being. So if we can prove that the universe began to exist, we can also conclude then that our universe has a cause. And a cause always denotes intelligence. Everything that you do is purposeful. Even if you're like, well, I just watched TV. On purpose you did. I just did this. On purpose you did. With purpose. Sometimes someone else's purpose is inflicted on you. It's still born out of purpose. So if we can conclude that the universe began to exist, which is what these three guys did, we can also conclude then that things that began to exist had to come from something. And if everything came from something, then here's what we're looking for. If the beginning of the singularity was all time, all space, everything we know, and it was the beginning of intellect, study, science, all that other stuff. If this all started here, then before that, here's what we're looking for. We're looking for something that is not bound by any of these things. We would call that being something that is not bound by space. A word we would use for that, someone that's not bound by space, is omnipresent. Scripture, before anyone knew any of this stuff, said that God is in all places at once. It says in Jeremiah, it says in the book of Psalms, it says, where can I go to hide from your presence? If I go to the top of the mountain, you are there. If I go in the depths of hell, you are there. If I go to the far reaches of the universe, you are there. You are found everywhere. So all of a sudden, we're starting to qualify this guy who is omnipresent. He would have to be. This is what this singularity model that astrophysicists use calls for. I'm looking for an eternal being who is everywhere at once. If it's the beginning of time, then I need something who is a necessary being. That means he's outside of time. So he's not bound by time. He's not bound by time. It says in Psalm 90, verse 2, that he is from everlasting to everlasting. In other words, he's eternally that way and eternally that way. He is not a ray that begins at a point and goes in one direction. He is a line that extends infinitely in both directions. He is from everlasting to everlasting. He is God. The book of Job is going to talk about that too. Who laid the foundations of everything? You were there before the universe was here. Who spoke it into existence? Job says, it was you, God. We now found a being that Scripture talks about that is both omnipresent and not bound by time. These are two of the specifications that our universe needs for a creator. He must be greater than everything. In John 1, verse 1, in Genesis 1, it talks about how this being makes everything. If someone makes something, they are by nature sovereign over it, for they had the power to not make it and also the power to destroy it. He must be more powerful than everything. It says all throughout Isaiah, he is the King of kings. He's the Lord of lords. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Nothing has been made, John 1:1 says, that wasn't made by him. And if he is capable of making everything, he is also sovereign over everything. Now we need one of ultimate intellect, for he has to be able to understand this very complex world that is finely tuned and understood. And the reason that you can perceive me right now is that there are thousands of cones and millions of rods in your eye that are doing electrical connections. Right now, your brain is firing more electrical connections than the whole city of Los Angeles combined, just to see me. And all those have to go together for you to perceive me in this moment. Whoever did this must have infinite intellect. We are looking for a God who is sovereign, who is all-powerful. As we would say, he is omnipotent. He has all power. He is not bound by time. He is in all places at once. And lastly, he would have to be omniscient. That means he knows everything. Scripture talks about a God who is bound by no time, who is limited by no space, who is powerful and created everything, and who knows everything that there ever was. Astrophysicists are searching for a being who is eternal that could have made everything out of nothing. Here are his attributes. Here is a list of a God who created everything with these exact attributes. We didn't even know these attributes. 6,000 years ago when this book was penned, no one knew these attributes needed to be there. You'd have had no purpose to ever call him omnipotent if you didn't know that was necessary for this God. This is a self-proclamation of who this God is that we're now searching for. And the Bible's sitting here going, we've been telling you all along. As we learn more and more things, more and more people are coming to this conclusion, including the leading astrophysicists who call a sticky discourse into play where God exists again. By nature of his name, do you know what he calls himself in the Old Testament? Yahweh. Do you know what that name means? It means being. It means I've always been, I am, and I always will be. We are searching for someone who's always been, who is, and always will be. And Yahweh goes, did you know my name means that? Did you know when I uttered that phrase, Yahweh, I literally told you I'm the one you're looking for? In Romans 1, verses 19, he says, look, I've made it abundantly clear that I'm here. I've made it clear who I am. I've made it clear. I've written my fingerprints are on the stars and the systems and everything else that I've done. I'm right here. Stop looking. But when science is forced to deal with only that which is observable, measurable, and repeatable, they can't come to a conclusion of a God. If you are a scientist and your conclusion is that God made it, you haven't done your job well. Right? It's like if you were let's say you were a baseball player and you wanted to try to get a ball over the fence. And so what you did is you found out that golfers can hit a ball a lot farther. So all of a sudden you bring a golf club and a golf ball and you go, instead of pitching it, I'm just going to hit it off this tee and I'm going to make it over the fence. You can't transcend sports. You can't go outside of it. Science can't leap into other things. They can only deal with that which is natural. God by nature does not fit into nature. He created nature. Super means above or greater than. He cannot be an answer to a natural question. He is, by definition, supernatural. So why hasn't science concluded this? They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to go on those expeditions for truth and arrive at an answer that is supernatural. That's not in their field. People who are allowed to do that, like astrophysicists, are doing that right now. And if your rhetoric in your brain right now is, no, trust me, I can prove it wrong, then you need to talk to a lot of people who have hundreds and thousands of degrees that you couldn't even pronounce and tell them why it's a brainless expedition to go on to arrive at the conclusion that there's a God. You also must ascribe to a theory like multiverse, where one of the four horsemen of the atheistic apocalypse is named Richard Dawkins, and his conclusion was this. Here's how there is life on our planet. There was a multiverse, and some alien from another universe was able to time warp and jump into our universe. He brought crystals with him, and he threw them on our planet. Those crystals had microbacteria, all of which had intelligence in them, and that's why you're here today. I kid you not. That is the theory. Alien. That's literally the theory. It's called panspermy. Look it up. Life was seeded here from another universe of which we have no evidence at all. And I feel like God's just sitting up there in heaven being like, you know what, guys? I wrote about this too in Romans 1. There's going to be a generation who just believes whatever their itching ears want to hear. You guys are going to be so far from me. You're going to be so broken in sin that the answers are going to punch you in the face, and you're going to arrive at a conclusion like aliens. This is why we as Christians have to be a light to people, and if you're not a believer, let go of that part of you that is resistant with these old YouTube videos that no one believes anymore. Do your scholarship research. Don't go to Wikipedia, go to JSTOR. JSTOR is online scholarly journal articles where if someone publishes, they have to publish it, and it has to be proven by a group of their peers in the field that are also geniuses, and they have to say, no, that's true. The research is true. Look that up. That's where this all comes from. All of it comes from that. So you need to use JSTOR articles, scholarly journal, replicated, defined, and defended articles to prove your point. Don't go, well, my dad one time said, your dad doesn't get paid to do this and know this. That's my challenge to you guys. And sometimes it's just a challenge for us who deal with doubt and everything else like that to know that we stand on grounds that are not because we have some whimsical wanting for our grandma to not go to just be dirt when she dies. That's not why we believe what we believe. We're not searching for hope and found this crutch that is the Scriptures. It's backed up, it's proven. And this is exactly what astrophysicists are searching for. And these are exactly the attributes he gives to us. Omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent. I said a lot of words today. And he's the king of everything. May we have the ability to, in humility, go, maybe there's something more. And the reason that we're studying Genesis is because we see a very broken purpose in our system. If we can push the reset and default button on why we are here and how we were made and what we were originally filled with and why we exist in the first place, maybe we can get back to our original design. Let's pray. God, as we search this truth, we know that it says in Scripture that you are the truth. And whenever we seek any truth, if we do it earnestly, not believing whatever our itching ears hear, but just believe the truth and search for things that are backed up and proven that we're going to arrive at your throne. God, thanks for our purpose, and help us on our journey to get back to what that is. In your name we pray. Amen.